This week, we got dibs on one of Chicago's most legendary voices in theater, Kirsten Fitzgerald, a longtime ensemble member at the Steppenwolf and the artistic director of A Red Orchid Theatre since 2008. Kirsten's work has helped define the modern Chicago theater scene, fearless performances with close-up, intimate storytelling, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. Her credits include acclaimed productions at the Steppenwolf, Clybourne Park, The Qualms, and Mary Page Marlowe, along with unforgettable performances at Victory Gardens, The Goodman, Rivendell, and probably every stage in Chicago at one point or another. At A Red Orchid, she leads a passionate ensemble that has been creating bold and inspirational work for more than 30 years in the heart of Old Town, staging world premieres and reimagined classics that keep the city's artistic culture vibrant and thriving. And since we're recording this on Halloween, it would be a dereliction of duty not to mention her role as Maria Walters on the Exorcist television show. Kirsten has built a career rooted on collaboration and craft, and today we're going to talk about that journey, the creative community in Chicago in general, A Red Orchid Theatre, always A Red Orchid, not The Red Orchid. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Fitzgerald. Welcome to DIBS.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. It's great to be here. I am an ensemble member at A Red Orchid Theatre, but as we all do in this city, we work everywhere. We work everywhere we can. I would be honored to be an ensemble member there. But A Red Orchid is my artistic home, so I spend most of my time there.
Growing up, did you grow up in the Chicago area?
I did.
Did you always know theater was your calling?
I think somewhere in high school it became a real option for me. I decided, or I became aware enough that that I could actually do it beyond the community, the summer community program or the high school production.
Yeah, when we had Anthony Rapp on, he talked about growing up in Chicago, the theater community, but it's such a calling because it's not an easy path to choose. Do you remember that first show that really made you think, this is it? Like you walked out of the theater just in complete awe?
I could speak to two things. There's two very specific memories I have. One of which is seeing a show up in the Lake Forest area where I grew up in Lake Bluff, and at Gorton Community Center, and it was I don't know actually if it was a high school production or a summer project, but it was a production of Godspell, and I remember being in the audience of that show and going, how do I do that? I just was sort of blown away. And then my family, we saw a lot of theater in Chicago, whether it was the Wiz at the Schubert or something at the Goodman or even, or Steppenwolf at the time, which was not in the space that it is now.
I assume Donny Osmond and the Technicolor, Joseph of the Technicolor Dreamcoat, because that seems to be a staple across everyone who's in theater in Chicago.
I saw that much in my later years. I saw that when it came to Chicago. Yeah.
It's a weird one that always gets mentioned for some reason. When we've had some people on, they always talk about that production and the theater scene in Chicago as a whole. You talk about your family going there. Yeah. When did you decide that this is something you wanted to do professionally and really commit to it?
I auditioned for schools thinking that maybe I could get a scholarship when coming out of high school. And I did, in fact, get into some really good schools, but without a lot of financial aid. So I ended up at a state school because it was the only place that had a musical theater major at the time back in the 90s, at a state school at University of Kansas. And I sort of went with all intentions of transferring after a couple of years and moving to New York, but you could not have paid me to leave. Lawrence, Kansas was this awesome little town with a ton of arts and music and a tiny little theater department inside this giant university that was sort of like a small ensemble almost. And it was just a really great place to dig in. It was during that time, and then that senior year of high school and that first year of college, and coming back to Chicago and seeing productions at on breaks, things like Animal Farm, and I'm going to blank on another name right now, but I just kept seeing things that I wanted to try doing that. I ended up at University of Iowa for grad school, which is where I really fell in love with working with playwrights and making new work.
I love that your experience is in the Big Ten school system, because I feel like a lot of times when people think they want to go into theater or something in like the musical arts, they think they have to go to like a small liberal art school or one on one of the coasts. So it's nice to hear. Yeah, it's nice to hear that you didn't, but still got to kind of where you wanted to be. And with that aspect of school, I've heard of people who get into those theater programs and then they keep auditioning and they just don't get like where they were. And it's hard because in high school, they were like the star. But then when you go into a program where everybody was the star, it's can kind of shake you a little and make you question. Did you like the fact that with going to a Big Ten school where maybe people don't think like Kansas theater, that you were able to have more experiences on the stage and, like you said, almost like an ensemble community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, a happy mistake, something that I didn't know I was even looking for, that worked out beautifully for me. I also loved that, particularly undergrad and in my early years, that no one was telling me I couldn't do more than one thing. So, going to a liberal arts school, I was still taking an anthropology class or a biology class and some different creative classes besides just acting. And I think, as an actor, that really fed me and feeds me as an actor. Even now, you cannot be working in a vacuum, otherwise you don't learn anything and you have no idea what's going on outside your own brain, so it's essential. And I think, I think that the notion of those departments inside those larger institutions as sort of a small ensemble is something that I'm only really putting together, now even.
It's funny. We've talked about this with some other guests that as time goes on, you look back at even who you were doing a job 5 years ago. You're like, that person had no idea what they're doing. And you could have been doing the same thing for 20 years. You've been with a Red Orchid since 2008. Was it right after University of Iowa grad school where you came back to work here in the theater scene? Or I was in broadcasting, so you have to go out into the, small little towns and everything and come back. Or did you come back to Chicago and start working right away?
I came back to Chicago in '94 after finishing grad school right away and started auditioning and, lived with my parents for about 6 months. And then I very quickly got my day, a good day job that meant I could, I could sustain myself outside of that situation and start auditioning even more assertively. I sort of miraculously fell into a day job that actually I loved, that very quickly turned into theater as well. With a mental health agency in Chicago called Thresholds, that actually I think is still Illinois' largest mental health organization. But a friend of the family connected me with them, and they were looking for somebody to help adults with severe mental illnesses work on interviewing skills and social skills and find jobs. And so that very quickly turned into doing theater, because theater games were the way to get at that stuff with everybody. So that was something that I kept doing for about 15 years while I was also acting and working around the city. I stumbled into a Red Orchid to see a show in '95 called The Victims of Duty, and it blew my mind in a way that, much like with some of my earlier experiences, I was like, I have to figure out how to work with those people. And so I kept auditioning and did a couple of shows with them, some really exciting ones. And in about 2001, I was invited to join the ensemble, which was, all of 6, I think, of us at the time.
Well, it started with the 3 founding members, and I want to make sure I get this right. I know that because one of them it's Michael Shannon, and is it Gus Van Swearingen?
Guy Van Swearingen. Yeah.
It's Guy Van Swearingen. Sorry, I was looking it up and it was taking too long for the webpage to load, which is always fun. Guy Van Swearingen, Michael Shannon, and Lawrence Grimm, which is a great collection of names. Lawrence Grimm is also just a fantastic. But these three start this theater in 1993, and I'm really curious to know at what point did it start to grow to start to invite in other ensemble members, and from your knowledge of what had happened, how long did it take before it became like an operating business? Do you have any information on that?
I sure do. It was a very it was a very gradual, process, really, and at the core of that process was mutual attraction, I think. But there was a Guy and Mike and Larry, and there were some other people involved at the time in 92, 93 had a play that they wanted to do, and Guy had been doing they had all been acting in the city already. Guy jokes that they founded the theater company because nobody would work around his firefighter schedule. He's a Chicago firefighter. And that schedule of 24 on, 48 off just didn't work with most people's rehearsal schedules. So he's like, I guess we have to do it ourselves, which is part of what I love about Chicago in general. If you are not finding if you're not getting the work you want to get, if nobody's producing the play that you have written, you can do it. You can just make it happen.
That's this podcast. This podcast there's nobody who celebrates everything that makes the city. Everything's a little niche, but it's all one big tapestry. And we decided to do it, and we did it. It's a very Chicago attitude. You're absolutely right.
So these guys, looked around the city to thinking they would rent a theater space, and it was expensive, and it made more sense for them to sign a year lease on this empty room that was storing restaurant equipment in Old Town for a year than to rent a theater space that was already established for 6 weeks. And they did a play, and it went well. And that play was called The Connection. It was a sort of a play by a Beat Generation writer named Gelber. And it was it went very well. And so they said, well, we built a theater in this room, so I guess we need to do another play. And that is when the name, the theater name, and the sort of commitment to continuing to work together came from that smaller group. And I think over those first 5 years, people fell off, and a few more joined the room. We're in the room a lot, and it was really somewhere in those early 2000s when we all, Guy originally and Larry and Mike decided that they would start formally inviting people, and it has continued that way ever since. Early on, they had to certainly do the business of incorporating and making an organization and registering with the state and all of that good stuff. And but really, it was for many, many years, Guy running the show, and really, all of us, including Michael and everybody else, writing grants and cleaning the bathrooms and running the box office. We just all sort of rotated in and out of that stuff. Nobody was getting paid. We were just doing it, and it was somewhere in those somewhere around 2000, in those early 2000s, where we were like, no, we have to start thinking about maybe we do need to hire a managing director, that sort of thing.
Well, thank you for sharing the origin story with us. I used to live in Old Town and used to walk past the theater all the time. And I always was so curious, where did the name come from? Do you know?
I do. The name itself is a direct quote from Naked Lunch, from a William Burroughs novel called Naked Lunch. and it describes the plume of blood that pushes back into a syringe when a junkie is shooting up. So that you've hit a vein when you see a red orchid bloom back into the plunger, the syringe. I'm having a problem with vocabulary today, I think.
No, you explained it. So I'm guessing like maybe could be totally wrong, but like the symbolism kind of is like, when you like hit the mark or when you're really like doing a performance the right way where you get like a reaction immediately. It's kind of
I
like
think
when you hit a vein, you immediately can see the blood come, maybe.
I think that is absolutely part of the symbolism behind that. I think in addition to that, the notion of being on the edge of something, like being on the edge of that trip, being on the edge of potentially, even dying with, we are in no way advocating that everybody go out and give it a whirl, but being on the edge of something either terrifying or wonderful, and that in addition, the fragile nature of beauty, that bloom that is never ever the same twice, and how gorgeous it is, how gorgeous it can be, and sometimes quite dangerous.
It's
As I
really,
understand,
yeah.
As I understand it, the Red Orchid, A Red Orchid, is a 60-seat theater. Is that still the case?
It is. We may have managed in our new configuration and with some new chairs to put 70. 70 is the absolute most we can put in there
Okay.
because of just the space itself. But we generally put between 60 and 70, depending on how the set is designed.
You've been the artistic director, right, since 2008.
Yep.
So how do you maintain like you said, it's being on edge and trying to keep pushing the envelope of creativity? Would you say that A Red Orchid is an experimental theater? Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, a lot of time we push those edges. We tend to do the plays that are not being done as often if they are already written. I There are some other theaters in town that I would describe as like their sole focus is experimentation, and but yes, I would describe us, put us in that group as well.
So, as artistic director, how do you decide? This is the 33rd season, correct? How do you decide what productions you're going to put in over the course of a season?
We still very much operate as an ensemble theater, and so we as an ensemble do a lot of reading throughout the year. We meet playwrights. We read in person and alone and on Zoom now, which has become very handy. Um, and at some point, and that point is coming up here this month in November, in the coming month, we will all sit down together and talk about all the plays that we've read that are still bugging us or eating at us or really exciting us. And so we'll have we meet once a month, and this month in November, that meeting will be a little bit longer than usual, and we'll talk about what plays we think we want to do. And then quite literally for many reasons, because we think, there's an amazing role for somebody in the ensemble, because we really want to nurture a specific artist, because it feels urgent to the world right now. So there's lots of things we consider, but at that point, then the ensemble quite literally goes away and votes, and they vote their top 4 or 5 plays, and then I end up with a pretty clear top, 4 to 6 titles that have the most enthusiasm around them and that people think are the most urgent right now. And from that, I make a season of 3 based on artist availability and themes of the plays, and that we're not doing all 3 15-handers and that kind of thing.
I like that it's still a democracy, that you take the votes into consideration and everyone gets to kind of share. And that even though you've been around for 33 seasons, it's still like from the original like way of doing things. It's continued and that everyone has a say and you really allow people to come with whatever they've been reading or interested in to present. That's
Yeah.
a really unique way of doing theater, especially for as long as you guys have been around.
Yeah. It's and I remember formalizing that sort of process, and it adjusts a little bit, of course, every few years we have to, say maybe we need to do this something a little differently, but I remember formalizing that with everybody in those early 2000s. It was before I stepped in with Guy. And it makes a lot of sense for an ensemble theater, particularly one where folks at the time certainly were not getting paid, but where folks are not, I don't know if that's the right way to say that. Not getting paid a lot. It can get really lonely trying to produce a play that there aren't a bunch of people who are also excited to do in the room. So I think I'm very fortunate that even in learning how to do this job, I had an amazing ensemble who was helping and chipping in.
So one show I'm extremely excited to see, and I currently live in New York, but Bug is coming. And for the longest time, I thought Bug was from Steppenwolf, but I learned that it actually came from you guys in 2002. And so it's so interesting to see shows that premiered with you that are still almost over 20 years later still being brought on the stage and reacted with different
Oh, for
actors
sure.
portraying. But I like preparing for this interview learned that Michael was originally in Bug,
Yeah.
which I'm sure was a very powerful performance.
Yeah, it was wild and really exciting. He originally, did that with Tracy I think in London just before we did it. And then so we did the US premiere then back in 2000, it was the 2001 season, I think. And we doing that play in a space like ours puts you basically in the hotel room with everybody, with the cast, and it was it was such an intimate experience and such a paranoid experience. I actually remember that one of the things that happened when we were just as we were opening that play was 9/11, and it made those themes of paranoia and and certainly the ending a little different. The things started landing in a very different way, which was really exciting. It's a testament to Tracy's writing, that play only becomes more relevant, it seems like.
Have you found that, like, as the theme, like, when you guys produce certain productions that something will happen in the world at the same time the production's happening, and
Yeah.
that theme becomes even more apparent or more impactful?
It's wild to experience that. A few years ago we did well, there's two that come to mind right away. The first is a play by Wallace Shawn called Evening at the Talk House that we were doing during the last Trump administration.
I'm sorry, we need to back up. You said Wallace Shawn wrote the play.
Wallace Shawn wrote Evening at the Talk House.
Yes. I did not know that. I didn't know he was also a playwright.
A group of folks at a cocktail party talking about the world and how they were and their relationships in it and to it, and some of the folks were and the world had changed, had become sort of there was a lot of covert bombing and kidnapping and killings going on, and it was very strange to have little bits of that play start us start happening, or for us to become more aware of that they were actually happening in the world as we were doing that play. The other one that I think of is an Ionesco play that we did in 2019 called Killing Game, that was about a plague. And to close that play and a couple of months later get sent home, have to, close the theaters and go home for some time during COVID was wild.
Now that's that it's in the air prescient kind of thing that you always end up having, which leads me to this current season.
Yeah.
You started the season with Veal,
Yep.
and it's a play about someone who becomes the queen of North America.
Mhm.
There was a No Kings protest a few weeks ago. We're not a political show. I'm just saying that what you feel out in the air kind of comes back to you. The next play that you have coming up, you're personally directing.
Yes.
Birds of North America. Could you tell us why you've chosen that particular play for this season?
Yeah, there is something very personal in that play. It's very interesting to me for the plays to be very different from each other as well. So if we think of of Veal as dealing maybe with more of the public issues, although it's a very personal setting. Birds of North America brings, I feel like, the focus down and into this one backyard, and really focuses on the relationship between this father and daughter, but has the outside world poking in at it, talking, they're dealing with why they can't connect, either personally, politically, socially, and on its surface might seem like a lovely conversation in a backyard, but is actually really, I don't know, kind of a violent story of how they to either take everything personally or unknowingly injuring each other nonstop. And there's many different angles to come at it. Most recently, as I have been reading it and talking to designers, which is what I spend these couple of months doing, our focus has been on that tension between intention and impact, and what that looks like, and how do we recognize it. And but really, one of the things that really we are always looking for in plays is not just the subject matter and the themes, but there has to be something really powerful in the relationships and the human needs of the characters. Because I do think theater in so many ways, and really poetry, I mean, a lot of art is about trying to figure out what are we doing here? Why do we even, what is this human existence on this,
And I
crazy
think
planet?
a lot of the times when you go see theater or even just go to a museum and look at art, the feelings that it can evoke, a
Yeah.
lot of the times it all stems back to what's the purpose?
Mm. Like, what's
And
our purpose?
yeah, what's
Yeah,
our purpose?
sure.
And you sometimes see these amazing playwrights, for example, and you're like,
Yeah.
wow, that's like their purpose is like to get these feelings, emotions, themes out in the world. But then you as the audience member think, well, what's my purpose?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
it's like,
hopefully.
hopefully, like, you
Yeah.
know, and it's like that dual kind of conversation that's happening
Mm,
without actually being spoken.
I agree. And it sparks an emotion or a sensation or a feeling that you're like, I never thought of it that way, or I never, that I've never felt that before. What does that mean? Or how do I feel that again? Yeah, all of that.
I was fortunate enough because we were able to speak with Glenn and Audrey at the Steppenwolf to go and see Mr. Wolf, its opening show. And I had been dealing with an illness for a while, so I had not had the chance to go out in the city for many years to really go out and see things. And with the perspective of having been through some stuff, to come back and be moved that greatly by a story that I identified with very little in a lot of ways, but the performances that they were able to get across in such a small space. I would imagine that have you had audience reactions that were as equally as intense as the performances, to where a performance either had to be stopped or there was concern for someone having some sort of response to something that was happening on stage?
We have had experiences where, yes, those feelings are very intense. We've never, in my recollection, had to stop a performance, but we have spent a good chunk of time with people in the theater after a performance. I think the only time I could remember us actually stopping a performance was right a little bit before my time, when somebody actually was injured on stage by a piece of glass, and so we had to stop that. But there's a production that we did a few years back called The Room. It's a Pinter play, and it was a very intense, sort of examination of fear and xenophobia and we found that when the play ended, nobody would leave. Everybody just sort of stayed, oftentimes at least half the house just sort of stayed in their seats. And some of it was they wanted to know if they were understanding things correctly, but some of it also was just that they were trying to put the pieces together of why it was making them feel so strange or uncomfortable.
I love those feelings. Maybe I'm like a little out there, but I do love whenever you're watching a play or a TV show or a movie and you just have to take a second to kind of process what you just witnessed.
Yeah.
Because I think that's actually the beauty of art. So, for example, all these books that are being banned, they make you uncomfortable for a reason.
Yeah.
Like art should make you uncomfortable because it makes you question a whole different, a ton of things, right?
Absolutely.
But that's interesting that after that play, like people kind of just had to sit with it for a little. And I think that that's when you're doing your job.
Yeah, even a play any play that gets strong reactions is really exciting to me. Whether be they, I can't get enough of it, or I don't ever want to go through that again. Any of that. Both ends of the spectrum are fascinating to me, and I do think, I am interested in yes, picking audience members up out of their seat a little bit and shaking them, and putting them back down and saying, and letting them think about it. We are not in the business of telling people what to think. I said this last night actually at a post-show conversation. I am far more interested in posing questions and having people walk out with a lot of questions.
As obviously a fan of science fiction, the idea that you can use it to use fiction in general, not obviously not science fiction, to put somebody in a position where they have to think beyond themselves is one of the reasons why, when I have conversations with people who I only do nonfiction or documentaries or read, it's like you're missing out on the opportunity to learn to be empathetic. And theater is the ultimate expression of that, right? Because there's an agreement between the stage and the performers. Like, you are agreeing to not be part of this, but to participate and give us a little bit so that we can go. Is there a play in the last few years that shocked you with people misunderstanding it completely? Has that happened to you at any of the recent shows? I feel like today's world, politically, message-wise, things get misconstrued.
Sure. Wow, that's a really good question. I haven't had anything where like the whole audience recently has been like, I feel like totally missed the mark. There are always some people there are always audience members and artists too who will read something and say, this is what I think this is about, and somebody else is going to say, no, this is what it's about. Well, aren't we saying this is bad? And somebody might come back and say, no, I think actually what we're saying is we need to pay attention to this so that people can decide for themselves whether it's good or bad, good or bad. I think there's we did a play last season called The Cave, which was a gorgeous play about a Palestinian American family making a move here in the States from one state to another, and the stress that came from both that move, but also from the world, what was going on at the time in the world, which was the Iraq War, and in really causing some post-traumatic stress for the father in the situation, and exacerbating some mental health issues there. And at the time when we were getting ready to and deciding to do it, it was sort of even in many circles uncomfortable or not okay to even say the word Palestinian. It was like you were making a statement, and really what we were after and what resulted, was a focus on the human beings in the story, and how essential it is that we pay attention to them.
No, absolutely. And when, Nick just brought up the question of, has anyone like gotten mad or walked away? And
oh, sure.
What came to my mind when I was younger, I watched Gone with the Wind. You sit through that 3.5, almost 4-hour movie, and then at the end, he just says, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. And that's it. And I just remember being so angry at the characters. If you guys would have just communicated and all this stuff. And the next morning, I remember my dad asking, how do you feel now about it? And I was just like, no, like it like still to this day, you can tell, like I get like very like annoyed about it. But I do think that's such a beautiful thing about theater is you're able to go and like you feel these things, you're wondering yourself like, why didn't they do this, why didn't you do that? But ultimately what it shows is like human beings are flawed in every different way, and that you watching this, you're like, well, you should have communicated more, you should have done this. But if you were in that situation, would you have put yourself out there? Would you have like actually had that hard conversation? And so I think like one beautiful thing about the stories that you guys tell at the theater is we're all flawed. And that's like the one thing that can kind of connect us all.
Yeah. There were plays, there was a play even that Steppenwolf did years ago called Downstate. There's a play that we did a few years ago called The Nether that dealt with pedophilia in some way, and we absolutely had some audience members who were furious about feeling like to talk about it was to normalize it, was to say in some way, and that is certainly not at all the intention, but I recognize the impact of that. And that some people can't talk about it. But those are two of the most beautiful plays and upsetting plays. Beautiful and upsetting.
That's so interesting that I didn't even think about topics that might be off the table. Are there any other topics that when you guys are voting or talking about what shows are coming up, you tread a little bit more lightly around, or is it just all fair game?
I mean, I think it's I think the harder the thing is to talk about, probably the more we need to talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, no, that's if the beautiful thing about this job that we're doing now and being able to go to all these different places in the city and the theater community in general is it seems to matter to people here to Hey, I have recently started to refer to life as a baton race. It's a relay race. We're all just carrying it for as long as we can and moving it forward. And it feels like a Red Orchid is one of the places that takes that kind of idea forward. Like, drama needs to be pushed. Drama and plays in general need to evolve with the zeitgeist. Is that one of the parts that you feel that your theater does very well?
Yeah, I do. I think, you know, and some of that comes from looking back at, you know, classic works, and some of it comes from insisting on hearing new voices, you know. And one of the things I'm excited, you know, I've talked about, you know, like my ideal season, the perfect season would be, if it's a season of 3, to do one classic, one contemporary play, and one brand new world premiere. And so, and sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. This year we happen to have 2 world premieres, 2 brand new plays, in Veal, and then our spring production, which is a play called The Targeted by a local playwright named Hannah Keim. And I, there was a classic that we were thinking of in that spot. And as a group, as an ensemble, everybody said, actually, you know, I love the idea of this classic. I do want to do it at some point, but we just read this thing and it feels more important right now. We want to do it right now.
That I appreciate the fact that you guys, you know, take the time to really put the thought into what's going to be shown. And it might be more fun to do the classic and everyone's kind of waited to do the classic, but you feel as a, you know, fan who thinks that drama can be used as a force for good. It's nice to hear that you guys, you know, think about that. You said you've been doing in Chicago theater scene since the mid '90s, and obviously, you know, I think every actor who works on stage in Chicago has done their tour of the Chicago Dick Wolf shows. But I would really want to ask you, as somebody who's been here through this, you know, the demographics of who makes up the theater scene, I am sure from when you started in the mid '90s was predominantly a white, you know, suburban group, and it has definitely diversified. Could you talk about how, like, what your memories of that process, and more importantly, how you feel it strengthened the theater scene?
Yeah, I mean, boy, you know, the more voices, the better, quite honestly. But I do, yeah, and we are a great example. A Red Orchid is a great example of, you know, our history is as a group, an ensemble of predominantly white artists, making plays. And as we have made sure to leave the doors open, or bring folks in the room that are different from us, it has only made everyone better, I think. I also think it is essential, and one of the things that we, you know, encourage and insist of all of our ensemble members is that they're going out and working other places as well. Whether it's in the city or outside the city, I think some of our best work happens because you know, or some of the most exciting things that happen are we meet artists outside and bring them in, or we go work somewhere else and learn something new and bring those things back to the room. I love working at Steppenwolf. I love working at the Goodman and at Victory Gardens when they were producing. And but I will say that I am most challenged as an artist when I walk back into the room at Red Orchid. And I think that is because of the many voices that we are asking and inviting to question.
That's so great. That's so great to hear. We usually Mallory's going to go with our 5 DIBS questions at the end, which you said you listened to a few, so you know it's coming. But I did want to ask before we do that. Red Orchid is one of those things I'm honestly just learning about through this whole thing. So, what do you want people who may not know what the theater is, or what's something you want to say to our audience about a Red Orchid going forward for the rest of this season and into the future before we wrap things up?
If you've never been, give it a try. If you think you know what theater is, or you're not sure even what theater is, just walk in the door. A Red Orchid is a very unassuming and inviting room. We're it's like going to your pal's basement a little bit and watching a movie, in that it's a comfortable, casual place to sit in a very small theater up close. You will see artists that you see on TV and on all the bigger stages, but you will be 2 feet from them, and breathe in the same air, and sometimes even, getting splashed or, hollered at.
My new close personal friend from the award ceremony at the Field Museum the other night, Harrison Ford, says, "Go sit in a dark room with strangers and learn something."
Yes. It's different. It's different than sitting in your living room. It's different than sitting in a movie theater even, but I encourage both. But yeah, sit in a room with a bunch of strangers and just breathe with them.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us and kind of going through the history and just like what we have coming up. Listeners, the link will be in this episode show notes. All right. So we'll make sure to let you all know. But we end with these like 5 quick questions. The first one is Cubs or Sox?
I grew up a Cubs. I'm Cubs.
Nick is shaking his head.
Shaking his head at me.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Ketchup on hot dog, yes or no?
Sometimes.
Okay. What is your favorite neighborhood in Chicago?
Right now, Ravenswood.
And what's your favorite season?
Fall.
I love it. And lastly, why do you love the city of Chicago so much?
Because of the people and the for me, the water, the lake. I can be in the city and still go float for a minute.
Yes. Well, thank you again so much for joining us on DIBS. And we're just like really excited to see the upcoming productions.